I never thought I'd be the kind of man who checks his wife's phone. But there I was, 3 months ago, standing in our kitchen at 2 in the morning, scrolling through Sarah's messages while she slept upstairs. The blue light illuminated my trembling hands as I read words that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Thanks for tonight. Same time tomorrow? The message was from her boss, David Crawford. My stomach dropped like I'd swallowed broken glass. Sarah and I met 7 years ago at a coffee shop near the university where she was finishing her marketing degree. I was 28, working construction, saving every penny to start my own contracting business. She was 24, brilliant, and had this laugh that could light up a room. I still remember our first date, dinner at an Italian place downtown where we talked until they practically threw us out. "You're different," she said that night, her green eyes sparkling in the candlelight. "Most guys my age just want to talk about themselves." I fell hard. Within 6 months, she'd moved into my apartment. Within 2 years, we were married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. She wore her grandmother's dress, and I cried when I saw her walking down the makeshift aisle between the rose bushes. Those early years were golden. We'd wake up on Saturday mornings and make pancakes together, flour everywhere, laughing at nothing. She'd help me with estimates for boss, her head for numbers complementing my hands-on skills. We talked about everything, kids, dreams, the house we'd buy someday with a workshop for me and a garden for her. Then, 3 years ago, she got the job at Crawford Marketing Solutions. At first, I was thrilled. Sarah had been working at a small agency for peanuts, barely covering her student loans. Crawford was offering her twice the salary and real opportunities for advancement. David Crawford himself had recruited her, calling her exactly the kind of fresh talent his company needed. "He seems nice," Sarah said after her first day, kicking off her heels and curling up next to me on the couch. "Really supportive. Says he sees management potential in me." I should have paid attention to the way she blushed when she said it. The changes started small: longer hours, weekend work, business trips that used to be rare, becoming monthly occurrences. Sarah would come home exhausted, claiming Crawford was really pushing the team to land bigger clients. She'd collapse into bed, too tired to talk, let alone touch. "It's just temporary," she'd say when I'd bring up how distant she'd become. "Once we land the Morrison account, things will calm down." But they never did. There was always another account, another crisis, another reason why Crawford needed her to stay late or travel with him to client meetings. I started to resent the man I'd never met, this shadow figure who seemed to own my wife's time and energy. The first real warning sign came about 8 months ago. Sarah came home from what she called a team-building dinner with her shirt buttoned wrong and her lipstick smudged. When I pointed it out, she laughed nervously and said she'd spilled wine on herself in the restaurant bathroom. "Clumsy me," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. The late-night texts started around the same time. Sarah would claim they were about work, but she'd angle her phone away from me when they came in. She'd step outside to take certain calls, returning with flushed cheeks and an excuse about client confidentiality. I became a detective in my own home. I'd listen to her side of phone conversations, trying to piece together context that didn't quite make sense. I'd study her face when she thought I wasn't looking, searching for signs of guilt or happiness that didn't include me. The worst part was how she'd become solicitous in other ways. She'd bring me coffee in bed, cook elaborate dinners, ask about my day with what felt like forced enthusiasm. It was as if she was trying to make up for something, and that something was eating me alive. 2 weeks after I found that first text, I decided to surprise her at work. I'd never visited her office before. She'd always said it was boring and that Crawford preferred to keep family visits to a minimum. But I'd finished a job early and thought I'd take her to lunch. The receptionist looked confused when I asked for Sarah Mitchell. "Sarah, she's not in today. She's in Chicago with Mr. Crawford for the Henderson presentation." My blood turned to ice. Sarah had told me she was working late on a local project. She'd texted me at noon saying she'd be home around 10. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When Sarah walked through the door at 10:15, I was waiting. "How was work?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Exhausting," she said, dropping her purse and avoiding my eyes. "The Henderson project is killing me. We worked straight through dinner." The lie fell between us like a stone. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand the truth. Instead, I just nodded and went to bed. That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe beside me, wondering who this woman was that I'd shared my life with for 7 years. When had she become someone who could lie to my face so easily? When had I become someone who would accept those lies? The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. Sarah had been acting stranger than usual, jumpy, secretive, breaking into tears for no apparent reason. She had asked me to work late that night, saying she had a big presentation to prepare for. Instead, I parked across the street from her office building and waited. At 6:30, she emerged with David Crawford. I'd seen his picture on the company website. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit. He was probably 20 years older than Sarah, but he carried himself with the confidence of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. They didn't go to a restaurant. They didn't go to a bar. They went to the Marriott downtown. I sat in my truck for 3 hours, watching the lit windows of the hotel, my mind cycling through denial and rage, and a grief so profound it felt like drowning. When Sarah finally emerged, smoothing down her skirt and checking her reflection in the glass doors, I felt something inside me break that I knew would never heal. But I still didn't confront her. Some cowardly part of me hoped I was wrong, that there was an explanation that would make sense of what I'd seen. So I kept pretending, kept playing the role of the trusting husband, while inside I was planning my revenge. I started with small things. I'd move items in her purse so she'd think she was going crazy. I'd delete messages from her phone before she could read them. I wanted her to feel as unmoored as I did, as uncertain of her own reality. Then I escalated. I knew Sarah's passwords. We'd never hidden them from each other in the early days. I started sending emails from her account to Crawford's business rivals, sharing confidential information that would damage his reputation. I created fake social media profiles and left negative reviews of his company online. It felt good to hurt him, this man who'd stolen my wife. But it wasn't enough. I wanted him to suffer the way I was suffering. The plan came to me gradually. I'd use Sarah's access to set Crawford up for something bigger. Embezzlement, fraud, something that would destroy his career and possibly land him in prison. I spent weeks researching financial crimes, learning about paper trails and digital footprints. But I needed more information about Crawford's business practices, his vulnerabilities. So I started pushing Sarah to talk about work, feigning interest in her projects and colleagues. That's when I noticed how she'd flinch when I mentioned Crawford's name, how she'd get a haunted look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching, how she'd started taking longer showers, as if she was trying to wash something off her skin. The pieces didn't fit the narrative I'd built in my head. If Sarah was having an affair, why did she look so miserable? Why had she lost 15 pounds and started having nightmares that left her crying in her sleep? The truth hit me like a physical blow 3 weeks ago. I was going through Sarah's laptop looking for evidence of their affair when I found a draft email she'd never sent. It was addressed to her sister Jennifer, and the subject line read, "I don't know what to do anymore." "Jen," it began, "I know I've been distant lately and I'm sorry. I can't tell you what's happening because I'm so ashamed. David he's been making me do things. It started with staying late for private meetings. And now he says if I don't do what he wants, he'll fire me and make sure I never work in marketing again. He has connections everywhere. He could destroy my career with a phone call. I know what you're thinking. I should report him, fight back. But who would believe me? He's respected in the industry. I'm just another employee who can be easily replaced. And Mike? God, Mike doesn't deserve this. He's been looking at me differently lately, and I think he knows something's wrong. But I can't tell him. It would destroy him and it would destroy us. I feel so dirty, Jen, so trapped. I come home to my husband and I can't even let him touch me because I feel like I'm contaminated. I'm losing my mind and I don't know how to make it stop." I read it 3 times before the words sank in. Sarah wasn't having an affair. She was being coerced, manipulated, abused by her boss. And I, in my jealousy and pain, had been planning to destroy the man who was already destroying her. The guilt was overwhelming. While my wife was being victimized, I'd been plotting revenge against her instead of trying to help her. I'd been so focused on my own pain that I'd missed her suffering entirely. But beneath the guilt was something else. A cold, crystalline rage unlike anything I'd ever felt. David Crawford had been abusing my wife for months, and I'd been too blind to see it, too wrapped up in my own insecurities to notice that she was drowning. I deleted the draft email and closed the laptop. Sarah would never know I'd read it, but Crawford would know I existed, and soon. I spent the next 2 days planning. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Crawford had used his position of power to abuse Sarah, and I was going to make sure he paid for it. I started by gathering evidence. I installed a recording app on Sarah's phone, capturing conversations with Crawford that clearly showed his pattern of coercion. I hacked into his email account and found messages to Sarah that were explicit in their threats and demands. I also discovered that Sarah wasn't his only victim. There were at least 3 other women in the company who'd received similar treatment. The hardest part was confronting Sarah. Last Friday night, I found her in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub with her head in her hands. She was crying. Not the quiet tears I'd seen before, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. "Sarah," I said softly, and she looked up at me with eyes that were red and hollow. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so, so sorry." I sat down beside her and pulled her into my arms. She tensed at first, then collapsed against me, her body shaking with the force of her grief. "I know," I said. "I know what he's been doing to you." She went very still. "What?" "Crawford. I know he's been forcing you to. I know it's not your fault." She pulled back to look at me, confusion and fear warring in her expression. "How do you—" "I've been watching. I thought you were having an affair, but I was wrong. I was so wrong, Sarah. I'm sorry I didn't see what was really happening." She started crying again, but differently this time, with relief, with exhaustion, with the kind of tears that come when you finally don't have to carry a burden alone. "I wanted to tell you," she said. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was scared you'd blame me or that you'd try to do something and make it worse." "I'm going to do something," I said, "but not what you think." That weekend, I put my plan into action. I'd learned that Crawford had a routine. Every Sunday morning, he went for a jog through Riverside Park. He was predictable, arrogant, the kind of man who thought his money and position made him untouchable. I was waiting for him at the secluded spot where the trail curves around the old oak tree. When he saw me, he slowed but didn't stop running. "Can I help you?" he asked, breathing hard. "David Crawford?" "Yes." "I'm Mike Mitchell, Sarah's husband." He stopped running then. I watched the calculation in his eyes, the quick assessment of threat and opportunity. He was probably wondering how much I knew, how much I could prove. "I'm not sure what Sarah has told you," he said carefully, "but—" "She didn't tell me anything," I interrupted. "She was too scared, too ashamed, but I figured it out anyway." His face changed then, the mask of concern slipping to reveal something cold and predatory underneath. "I think you misunderstood the situation. Sarah is a valued employee who's been working very hard to advance her career. If she's given you the wrong impression about our professional relationship—" "Professional relationship?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call it when you threaten to destroy someone's career unless they sleep with you?" He took a step back, his eyes darting toward the trail as if calculating his chances of outrunning me. "I don't know what you think you know, but you're mistaken. Sarah has never complained about because you made sure she couldn't. You isolated her, threatened her, made her feel like she had no choice. But she did have a choice. She had me." I pulled out my phone and played one of the recordings I'd made. Crawford's voice filled the air between us, cold and commanding. "Sarah, I need you to stay after the office party tonight. There are some things we need to discuss privately. You understand the consequences if you disappoint me." His face went white. "You can't. That's illegal. Recording without consent is a misdemeanor," I finished. "Sexual coercion is a felony. I have hours of recordings, emails, testimony from other women you've abused. I have enough evidence to put you away for years." "What do you want?" he asked, and I could hear the fear in his voice now. I want you to resign. Today. I want you to liquidate your assets and put the money in an account I'll designate. Compensation for Sarah and the other women you've hurt. And I want you to leave town. Permanently. You can't be serious. I have a life here, a business. You should have thought of that before you decided to be a predator. I stepped closer and he stumbled backward. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this park and drive straight to your office. You're going to write a resignation letter citing personal reasons. You're going to transfer 75% of your liquid assets to an account I'll give you the details for. And then you're going to disappear. And if I don't, I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. Then I release everything to the police, the media, and your wife. How do you think Linda will react when she hears what you've been doing? How do you think your daughter will feel when her friends at Stanford find out her father is a rapist? The color drained from his face completely. You wouldn't. Try me. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him weighing his options. Finally, his shoulders sagged in defeat. How long do I have? 24 hours. And Crawford, if you ever come back to this city, if you ever try to contact Sarah or any of the other women, if you so much as think about retaliating in any way, I'll make sure what happened to you today looks like a gentle warning. Do we understand each other? He nodded, unable to speak. Good. Now get out of my sight. I watched him walk away, shoulders hunched, the confident stride replaced by the shuffling gait of a broken man. I felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only a grim sense of justice being served. Crawford resigned the next day. The company released a statement about him pursuing other opportunities, but word spread quickly through the industry about the real reasons for his departure. The other women he'd abused came forward, filing a class action lawsuit that would ensure he never worked in marketing again. Sarah was different after that, not healed exactly, but lighter, somehow. She started therapy, both individual and couples counseling with me. We talked about everything, the secrets and shame and the way trust can be broken and rebuilt. I kept thinking you'd leave me, she told me one evening as we sat on our front porch watching the sunset. I kept thinking that if you knew what happened, you'd see me as dirty, damaged. Never, I said, taking her hand. What happened to you wasn't your fault. It was his choice to be a monster, and it was my choice to stop him. She squeezed my fingers. I love you for what you did, but I'm scared too. What if there are consequences? What if he tries to come back? He won't, I said with certainty. Men like Crawford are cowards. They only prey on people they think are powerless. He knows I'm not powerless, and he knows I'm watching. 3 months later, Sarah got a job at a smaller agency run by a woman who specialized in working with survivors of workplace harassment. She's happier there, more confident, slowly becoming the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. As for me, I learned something about myself that I'm still processing. I learned that love isn't always gentle, that sometimes protecting the people you care about requires you to become something harder than you ever thought you could be. I don't regret what I did to Crawford. I don't regret the fear I put in his eyes or the way I made him understand that his actions had consequences. Some people might call what I did vigilante justice, but I call it love. The fierce, protective kind that doesn't ask for permission or forgiveness. Sarah and I are rebuilding our marriage one day at a time. We're learning to trust each other again, to communicate without secrets, to touch without the weight of the shame between us. It's slow work, but it's good work. And sometimes, late at night when Sarah is sleeping peacefully beside me, without the nightmares that used to wake us both, I think about David Crawford in whatever city he's hiding in now. I hope he remembers what I told him in that park. I hope he knows that I'm still watching, still waiting, still ready to be the monster he turned me into if he ever dares to hurt my wife again. Because that's what love looks like sometimes. Not flowers and poetry, but the willingness to stare into the darkness and fight whatever you find there. And I would do it again, without hesitation. For the woman who laughs at my jokes and makes pancakes on Saturday mornings and trusts me enough to heal in my arms. I would do it again in a heartbeat.